Level 1. The bare chassis. You own a carbon fiber tub. That's it. No engine yet, no wings, no suspension geometry dialed in. Just the monocoque, the safety cell every modern F1 car is built around, sitting on a workshop floor looking less like a race car and more like a very expensive black canoe. Most people don't realize this is where every single F1 car in history actually starts. Not the engine, not the livery, the tub. Every gram of it matters, because every gram you add from here forward either makes the car faster or makes it slower, and there is no neutral option in this sport. You bolt on a basic engine, nothing exotic yet, just enough to get the car moving under its own power for the first time. No aerodynamics, no wings, front or rear. The car looks almost naked, almost wrong, like a sentence missing half its words. You take it out for the first shakedown lap. It's slow by F1 standards, genuinely slow, the kind of lap time that would get laughed out of a real paddock. But it's also the first time this specific car has ever moved, and there's something about that particular kind of slow that nobody who's done this ever forgets. Level 2. The Aero Package. You add the front wing first, not because it's the most important piece. It isn't, not yet. But because without it, the car genuinely won't turn properly at any real speed. The front wing manages airflow before it ever reaches the rest of the car, and getting it wrong here ruins everything you bolt on afterward. Then, the rear wing. This is the piece most casual fans actually picture when they imagine an F1 car, the big visible aerofoil at the back. And it does exactly what it looks like it does. It pushes the rear of the car down into the track, trading raw top speed for the kind of grip that lets you carry speed through a corner most road cars couldn't survive at half that pace. You add the floor next, and this is where most people watching from outside the sport completely lose the plot. Because the floor looks like nothing. It's flat, it's boring. It's also responsible for more downforce than the wings combined, using the exact same principle that lets an airplane wing generate lift, just flipped upside down, to push the car into the ground instead of pulling it into the sky. The car looks like an F1 car now. It also drives nothing like the bare chassis did. You take it out, and for the first time, you feel the car actually want to turn, instead of just letting you point it somewhere and hope.
Level 3. The suspension geometry. Here's the part nobody tells you when you start this. Aerodynamics alone don't make a fast F1 car. Get the suspension wrong underneath all that downforce, and you've just built a very expensive, very aerodynamic disaster that bounces uncontrollably the moment you actually push it. You start with ride height, and the numbers here are smaller than you'd expect. We're talking millimeters, not centimeters. Run the car too high, and you lose the aerodynamic benefit of the floor entirely, because ground effect only works when the car is sitting close enough to the track surface for the airflow underneath to actually accelerate the way the floor is designed to make it. Run it too low, and the floor scrapes the track at speed, sending the car into the exact kind of violent, uncontrollable bounce that's ended more than a few real F1 weekends in recent seasons, a phenomenon teams call porpoising, named because the car literally bucks up and down like a dolphin breaking the surface of water, except at 200 miles an hour with a human being strapped inside it. You dial in camber next, the angle of the tire relative to the road, then toe, then a dozen smaller adjustments that individually feel insignificant and collectively decide whether this car is drivable at the limit or just dangerous at it. The car finally stops fighting you. You take it through a series of corners that would have spat the level 2 version into the gravel, and it just holds. That feeling, the first time a tuned suspension setup actually works the way the math said it would, is the moment most people in this sport get permanently hooked. Level 4. The power unit. This is where you swap the basic engine for a real power unit. And here's the part that surprises almost everyone the first time they actually learn it. A modern F1 engine isn't just an engine anymore. It's a hybrid power unit with 6 separate components working together. The internal combustion engine itself, plus a turbocharger, plus 2 separate electric motor generator units that recover energy under braking and deploy it back under acceleration, plus a battery to store that energy, plus the control electronics tying all of it together in real time. You're not just bolting in horsepower, you're tuning an entire energy recovery system, balancing how much electric boost to deploy and exactly when to deploy it for maximum effect. Because dump it all at once and you waste potential. Spread it too thin and you never feel the advantage at all. You adjust the turbo's response curve. You tune the brake-by-wire system that has to seamlessly blend mechanical braking with the electric motor's regenerative braking so smoothly that the driver can't feel the handoff between the two systems, even under maximum braking at the end of a straight. The car is faster now in a way that's almost uncomfortable to drive. Not because it's unstable, the suspension work from level 3 holds it together, but because human reaction time genuinely starts to feel like the limiting factor for the first time, not the car.
Level 5. The problem nobody warns you about. Here's the thing about everything you've built so far. Every single upgrade you've made, the aero, the suspension, the power unit, has one enemy working against all of it simultaneously. And it's not another team. It's heat. Your brakes, glowing visibly orange after hard braking zones, sometimes reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Your tires, which only work properly inside a frustratingly narrow temperature window. Too cold and they have no grip at all. Too hot and they degrade so fast you're pitting 3 laps earlier than you planned. Your power unit, generating enough heat that the entire bodywork has to be designed around getting air to specific components without disturbing the aerodynamics you spent level 2 perfecting. This is the level where teams genuinely fail, where billion-dollar operations lose races not because their car isn't fast enough, but because they cooked a set of tires in the first 10 laps and have nothing left for the final stretch when it matters most. You redesign the cooling ducts. You adjust tire pressures by fractions of a single PSI, numbers so small they'd be a rounding error in any other sport. And here, they're the difference between winning and finishing 8th. You learn that the fastest car on paper isn't always the fastest car on Sunday, because Sunday has weather, has a track temperature that's 15 degrees higher than every practice session, has variables your perfect setup never accounted for. This is also, by the way, the level where most amateur tuners quietly give up, because this is the part that has nothing to do with bolting on better parts and everything to do with understanding a system so completely that you can predict how it fails before it actually does. You don't give up. You start treating tire and brake temperature like a 5th aerodynamic surface, something to be managed as carefully as the wings themselves.
Level 6. The race weekend setup. Here's what almost nobody outside the sport understands. The car you build in the garage on Thursday is not the car that crosses the line on Sunday. It can't be. Conditions change too much across a single weekend for a fixed setup to stay optimal the entire time. You adjust wing angles between practice sessions based on what the data actually shows instead of what you assumed it would show. You change tire strategy based on a weather forecast that updates hourly, sometimes gambling on a setup built for rain that never actually arrives, sometimes the opposite, caught completely unprepared when it does. You make a final, almost desperate round of changes after qualifying because grid position changes everything about the race that follows it. Starting from the front means defending a lead. Starting from further back means a setup built for overtaking, more aggressive on the straights, even at the cost of cornering speed you'd never sacrifice if you were starting at the front. This is the level where you finally understand something that took 6 full levels to arrive at honestly. There is no single perfect setup for an F1 car. There's only the correct setup for one specific track, one specific weather forecast, one specific driver on one specific day. And the second any of those 4 variables shift even slightly, you're tuning again from somewhere close to scratch. The car that crosses the finish line first was never really one car at all. It was a different car for every single session of the weekend, adjusted constantly by people who understood that standing still, even for an hour, even with the fastest setup on the grid, means falling behind. Most people think an F1 car is already perfect the moment it leaves the factory. It never is. It's never even finished. The fastest teams in this sport aren't the ones who built the best car once. They're the ones who never stopped tuning it.